topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Hi, welcome. My name is Arti Kumar Jain, and this is Light Up Your Life. I'm so excited to be with you all today and for our first show. And of course, with anything, there's some nerves with doing anything for the first time. So I'm so excited that you'll bear with me for today. First of all, I wanted to tell you I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. We'll have various topics throughout, and I really want to hear from you on the things that are relevant to you. And today, the topic is actually my life story, so that you can kind of get a glimpse into my life, so that you see where this Light Up Your Life concept came from. And while there's a lot of discussion of cancer support that's going to be on our show from various guests, we're also going to focus a lot on general health. A big passion of mine has become cancer prevention, but also the fact of living disease-free and without disease in our lives. And I'm not just talking about disease as in physical. We're also talking about mental blockages, mental disease, physical disease, of course, and ailments. Even things like headaches, like how can we find a way to minimize even those small little things that we consider, those tension headaches. And for those of you who are on the road, sometimes I'll be leading some guided relaxation exercises. Of course, you can't really close your eyes, but you can definitely listen to my voice and try to work on breathing and do a reset. And we'll be focusing a lot on the idea of breath work. And so, and those of you who are able to stream in and watch live, of course, you can practice along with me. So let's start from the beginning. My story. It's hard to talk about yourselves, right? For all of us. But I think that it's important for you all to know who I am so that you know who's coming into your screen and to your radio on Fridays at 11. So I actually grew up in Northern Virginia in Fairfax. I was brought up by two immigrant parents. My mom and dad immigrated from India. My dad actually came to the United States through my grandfather. My grandfather was in the embassy, and so he traveled a lot throughout the world. And the United States was actually one of the places that he was stationed for a while in Washington, D.C. And so my dad and his brothers and his sister immigrated to the country. And my dad actually studied engineering here in a university in Washington, D.C. And so like many Indian families, traditional Indian families, when it's time to get married, you have, quote unquote, an arranged marriage. So my dad went back and traveled to India, of course, met several girls, women. And my mom and dad got the opportunity to meet each other because the families knew of each other. The difference was my mom and dad had the choice of saying no, that they didn't think this was a good idea. In some traditional families, you actually, the day that you get married is a day that you meet your life partner. And that still actually can exist in certain Indian communities, in some South Asian communities. Anyway, so they had the opportunity to meet, and of course, my mom and dad decided to get married. My mom came over with 2 suitcases over. A lot of families, of course, when they immigrate, come with just 2 handfuls of all of their belongings. I can't imagine doing that, but they found their way. And so About 2.5 years later, I appear, and my mom is trying to figure out her way. My dad's working as an engineer, and then he had a side business in real estate. So he was always passionate about doing different things. And in my story, chronic illness started pretty early with my dad. My dad actually had a rare condition called Wagner's granulomatosis, which is an autoimmune disease. And there's not actually a lot of cases out there, but my dad was actually a study at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, because it is such a rare condition. And at that time, we didn't really focus a lot back in the 80s on autoimmune disease, right? This is all the cutting edge research, and everything that's happening is happening in the last about 15 years. But so I just remember a lot of my childhood being in hospital wards. We spent a lot of time in the hospitals. He had multiple surgeries, especially Wagner's does affect a lot of your sinus cavities, so a lot of ENT kind of stuff. And so I just remember how it was to be with someone who was chronically ill, and what that looks like. Little did I know what a role this story would play in my own life and what I have chosen to do. But as we know, things that stem from our childhood sometimes reappear in our own life stories later down the line in the timeline. And so after that point, with my dad's illness, my mom was continuing, but of course her own illnesses started as well, with high blood pressure coming in play a little bit later. But as you know, stress plays such a role, and our body is a beautiful being, but it can also only take such a beating with chronic stress. And when we're not paying attention to the mindful eating patterns and all of that stuff of what we're putting into our bodies. But actually the role of chronic stress is huge. And actually when you face it, disease does play a big role in how it presents itself. So with my dad's condition, he actually, in 1991, I was 12, he passed. And he died in the hospital on the day that he was actually supposed to come home. So, and we'll talk about different types of grief, because that's also a big passion of mine. But the fact is, there was definitely, every loss is trauma in itself. But I think we were expecting him to come home, and that day that it didn't happen was, a bit of a shock. And so I spent a lot of my teen years, of course, trying to figure out, life's purpose, life's meaning. It was just my mom and me. And so you really, when you're faced with an early loss of a parent, I think you try to figure things out and understand. And so that played a big role. And I didn't realize until later, right? Like how big of a role anything in our childhood can play until we keep going, and then we pause, and then we pay attention. And so with that, went through school, and then for undergraduate, I decided I just really loved my psychology class back in high school. And so I actually, for undergrad, I started pre-med, and then my first experiences with like biology and biology was in my program. I was like, okay, I really can't. I don't think I can do this for the long run. So I actually tapped out of the pre-med route, and I just really have, like I said, loved psychology. So looked into psychology. And so with psychology, I actually minored in international studies and peace and conflict resolution. And granted, I haven't done a lot with the second part, but I have found that peace and conflict resolution, those skills still play a critical role in different ways. And I've always been passionate about children. So actually, I did a lot of work with early childhood. And so I found myself really finding that the children were a big part. And so I became what's called a kindergarten assistant, gave that a shot, and I was like, oh, I really love this. So then I went and got my master's in elementary education. And I taught 7 years in Loudoun County in Northern Virginia, which I really attribute a lot of growth to, and a lot of my hats off to teachers everywhere. I think we definitely need to acknowledge their presence in our lives and what they do. And they are first responders as well, each and every day. And so with that role, I had always, the day that I stepped into the classroom, I said to myself, when I'm not feeling this or I'm not doing service, I need to get out. And so about year 3.5, I decided I was really paying more attention to the mental health needs. Like sometimes I was known as the softie. And so all the kids that kind of needed extra support, extra love in some ways, a different type of love, because I was the softie. They sometimes would be put in my class. But so I actually decided that I wanted to look into this mental health route. And so I continue to teach, and it really helped to be doing my clinical mental health background at the same time. I really think I became a better teacher to really incorporate everything from that program. And so after that, I worked in a bunch of clinical settings. I worked in private practice. At that time, I got married, and so my husband and I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and I worked at MUSC in a day treatment program, outpatient program, as well as a different setting, a child life setting in the hospital. So got to see the role of what cancer can play for kids as well, and some chronic illness for children. Worked in a private practice out in a kind of like a rural area out in South Carolina, in Moncks Corner. A great practice out there. And then we moved to Virginia Beach, and I worked in a clinical setting and provided support for day treatment staff, basically was their clinical supervisor, and did assessments for kids in the school setting. And then continued also to do outpatient work. And so then my kids came along. And so I decided I had always envisioned just taking a break and basically taking a break and just spending time with them. So I was lucky and fortunate. My family was able to make it work. My husband was very supportive for me to be able to stay home. In the interim, my mom actually decided to move closer to us, and it was a great omen, because those precious memories that now I cherish, as well as our family cherish. She moved down to be closer to us from Northern Virginia. And so she was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer back in February of 2018. And so in that diagnosis, stage 4, is when I think the shift for me started to happen of how precious life is. I think kind of had taken for granted how things could be in life and how quickly they can go. And so with that stage 4 diagnosis, like many of our listeners are probably listening on the fact of what cancer and what it can look like to have something hit so close to home, it really changes perspective. And so in that journey, we did go that chemotherapy route. So she did have 3 cycles of chemo just to help the tumor shrink, and then to go into surgery, and then to have 3 more rounds of chemo. As we all know, chemo is so taxing to the body. So there were so many moments where she had to actually to take breaks. And so, it was like all of it is a journey. It was somewhat of a longer journey when her counts weren't there. And so, as you know, when you're getting ready to do a round of chemo sometimes, and getting your mental preparation and all that preparation that happens, when it doesn't happen, it can really be a little bit of an offset in the whole process too. And so along with that, that journey, there was a point where I was asking my mom if we could really introduce some alternative therapies, like, can we really look at other modifications? We had a great holistic center here with Dr. Dabu's office. She's an acupuncturist, does a lot of Eastern medicine. She'll also be on our show in the future. But to really incorporate the fact of having alternative therapies examined. At that time, my mom actually said no, because of the fact that, as anyone knows, the volume of what chemo can do to your body, and just the days and the weeks in between to get to the next cycle, and to know that it's your whole life, right? It becomes your whole life for so long to be in this cancer cycle, that active stage when you're diagnosed and seeking treatment, conventional treatment. So at that point, she said no. Then she did reach a stage with her own journey that she basically was able to have a period of it wasn't total remission, because she still had lesions on her liver and she still had it in her lymph nodes, but did have some reprieve. So when it did reappear, she did decide, okay, let's try these alternative methods. So we did seek out Dr. Dabu for acupuncture. We also worked in conjunction with the Reiki Healing Foundation in India, who helped provide some nutritional counseling, a nutritional program for her. So my mom had cut out dairy and really modified her diet in some ways, like really looking at what she was putting into her body. And she had become actively involved anyways when we were going through the conventional treatment, like looking at juicing and looking at all those modifications. And alongside with her, I also eliminated dairy from my diet and made some adjustments. And I think that was partially because I wanted to provide her some comfort and relief too, to have someone doing it with her. But I also realized when I was researching the heck out of everything that it truly was something that I thought was important to do. So the dairy-free piece came in for both of us at that time. So my mom continued to do things. And then at that point, of course, hospice came into play and told us that she had about 6 months. And so the days that she could do a lot, we really did a lot with just being out in nature. She grew up in the farms in India. So they always say, those who are approaching their end of life stages really want to do things that remind them of their childhood and youth. She really talked to a lot of her family in India, maybe the ones that they had all taken the relationship for granted. She really loved connecting with them. Loved when we could go to the strawberry field or to be outside in nature, picking her own vegetables. You could see it was really reminiscent of her own past. And also to spend that time in nature, right? Like to truly be at one with nature. You could see that anytime she could really muster the energy, she wanted to just sit outside. And you see that really important piece when someone's going through survivorship, and when you see them going through active diagnosis and treatment, that the days that they can go outside or they're feeling it, they just love the feeling of that being present in nature. And so with that, it just played such a huge role of how the next 6 months were shaped. And so we spent a lot of time doing various things, talking a lot about what it would look like. And she always said to me, she said this phrase of, in Hindi, which we spoke a little bit of mixed language dialogue, would be like, wait, you'll see these beautiful flowers emerge. Like these beautiful plants and flowers emerge, is what she would say in Hindi. And I didn't really get it at that point, right? You don't get a lot until somebody passes and when you're trying to make sense of meaning, I think. So in August of 2019, she did pass. And so as much as I was prepared for that grief, and even the hospice team actually said I was handling it pretty well. I mean, I think maybe it was that I was mentally preparing myself. I think you still have a lot of grief that you deal with regardless. But in that journey, I slowly, of course, it's really hard to go through somebody's belongings, but you sometimes don't have a choice when you're looking for things or trying your best to make sense of it. I'm actually I'm currently in the space that she was, this room. And I had one day just walked in thinking maybe I should make some sense of the space. I walked in and she had on her nightstand, actually it was a makeshift nightstand, but she had it's called the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu scriptures, which provide a lot of relief and healing for so many. And so she had it. And in there, she had her business card. I'm sorry, no, I put the business card there later. I'm sorry. In it, she had written the life stages from birth all the way to end of life. And those of you who know anything about life stages, like Erik Erikson, it starts with just the journey of going through all the way from birth to end of life. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, wow, this is so amazing. How deep my mom is, and just really admiring her handwriting and being like, this is so cool and all that stuff. A few weeks later, I'm helping put together this Reiki workshop with the Reiki Healing Foundation in India. And just to give you some light, Reiki is this awesome energy healing force with actually helping you with the powers within. It helps you to really use your, it's called like self-healing powers is the best way I define it. But we're actually going to have some guests who speak to it. Because I practice myself, it's really hard for me sometimes to describe what the role is, but we'll have some guests who really help you to understand that perspective. And so with the Reiki, I did a self-treatment, and a few days later, I come in again, and Reiki really helps to build the third eye and intuition. So I look at it again, and I realize this is going to be a nonprofit. Somehow all these ideas start popping. This will be the nonprofit with looking at services from birth to the end of life. And then in the meantime, another piece of intuition came into my life where I had always, during our graduate program for education, the education component, we had to come up with a makeshift company that provided some services. And at that time, I came up with Love and Light for kids. And so then I'm like, wow, this is going to be, because I didn't want to let go of my love of children and the work that I want to do with them. I did know that I wanted to branch out on my own and do my own thing. And so with that came the Love and Light for Kids, LLC, which is the business side that works with children and parent and family coaching. And so on this journey of this year, this post-grief year after losing my mom, I basically got a bunch of certifications because I wanted to make sure I was providing quality care. Everything was grounded in making sure whoever comes out to seek services or even consultations knows that I have a background aside from my own personal knowledge, like really professional caregiving. And so in that journey, I got a health coach certification and a parent-child coach certification, and then also what's known as a certified professional coach. A little different from life coaching, but still essentially has the same skill set. And so I think if I look back, I was dealing with my grief through just throwing myself right straight into work in a healthy, positive way, right? Really giving meaning. Giving meaning to what I know when I look at those life stages, what she and I feel like are the legacy to carry forward. How do we help heal, and how do we help people to deal and have a quality and healthy mindset in life? And that's exactly where this organization, Diya Holistic Life Care, comes from. So Diya means light, or it's the carrier of the light, right? And so the more that I do research, the more that I have done my programs, we have two brains, like our mental brain, and then we also have our GI brain, our GI gut health. So we actually have two very important brains. And so with the GI, in that space, we also in Hindi or in Sanskrit call it Agni. Agni means fire. And actually we have what's known as a fire pit in our stomach. And so with that titling, I was thinking of Dia as light force, because we all have a light in us. It gets dim at different points. It gets lit up at different points. But the goal is to keep it lit for longer rather than let it die out, right? And so with support, with assistance, with love and kindness, I think this can be achieved. And I think education is key. I think having accessibility for services and for reaching folks is really important. And that comes through this nonprofit, the Holistic Life Care. Our goal as a 501c3 is to provide services that maximize a person's joy, love, and happiness coming through health. You know, there's a saying, it's called health is wealth. And actually, a lot of folks who actually do have wealth, material wealth, have said when they don't have health, it doesn't mean anything. And so what happens is a person can truly feel joyful when they do feel that they're, of course, in the right economic state of mind, the right income level, but they cannot achieve that optimal level without that piece of health. Excuse me. And so a focus throughout the journey that we do is to help hold hands through different life stages. So for instance, in my journey, I have a huge passion for end of life care. So we do run some grief workshops once a month, and we do various topics. So I am now an end of life doula. You may wonder what that is. An end of life doula is a little different from an end of life coach, but it's someone who provides comfort for those who are at the end of their life or for their caregivers and their family. I found the extreme importance to help really to support hospice staff. As hospice staff, you know, they do have that bereavement counselor or coordinator, but they also need support, especially after death. And so I have found the need of this death doula community to come in, or end of life coaches, to really help to embrace what we all know is a part of a metamorphosis of life, right? The fact that we do have a beginning, middle, and end. So a big focus of DIA is also helping provide end of life services and support. And that's during that person's life and post for the family, and also building legacy, like legacy projects, legacy items, and legacy things. And for me, I realized that the legacy for my family is definitely these two organizations that have come post, and how the transcription of my mom's words and what they mean, and how I have decided that this is my new life's mission and my life's work, is to really embrace, to really embrace that piece. And so what I want to encourage us to do is to have, as humans, to really understand our potential and our capacity for what we can do. For case in point, I visualize myself having some type of maybe like I already have a small podcast on Anchor that are really like 2-3 minute segments that I give to parents, little tips, and then even just little tips that kind of help to guide. But I never thought that I'd be ready to have a radio show or a podcast. But I have, of course, been guests on several, and have several more guest experiences coming up. But when the opportunity was brought up a few weeks ago, I realized, okay, the saying of yes more than saying of no, that shift that we can each do. And so I am definitely out of my comfort zone to do something like this. But I realize that this is also going to allow for that forum to start getting the word out there, to work on the piece that I believe in, which is advocacy and education, to have guests who empower and educate, to have a forum where you feel supported, where you know that you know where to find me, you know where you can get services, as well as just whatever programs that you think might interest you. And And that's where I'm very humbled to know that opportunities don't just come knocking for no reason, right? We just forget to open the door, or we're afraid of opening the door. And so this is definitely a leap of faith for me too, to not address my fears. You know, those of you who've heard of Brené Brown talk a lot about, she does a lot of work around vulnerability and fear and addressing, and how do we address our vulnerabilities, right? Vulnerability comes through sharing our stories, through leading our best lives, through embracing the hardships. And it can be so challenging and difficult to do. So how do we go through it? Do we tend to numb ourselves and tend to fall away by the wayside? Maybe we eat, drink, our worries away, which we all have found ourselves doing, right? Some form or shape, especially during the COVID period, where we might be in some type of lull where we just don't know how to address a lot of our anxieties and our fears. Or do we embrace it hardcore, full on? And I can tell you today that when you look back at your past, you probably grew the most from the most difficult times of your life, whether it was through your own disease or through your family's disease or through the loss of a loved one. And especially during this COVID period where a lot of folks, and my heart truly goes out, who have lost their lives, who have lost material possessions, who have lost businesses, who have lost their way of living, who are looking for a shift and looking for a new beginning. And so those are things that we want to help to do, is to provide ways for new ways of living and new beginnings. So right now, a big focus for Dia is indeed cancer support, a big passion of mine. We also are doing a lot of research and looking into cancer and Reiki. I am a Reiki Ambassador with the Reiki Healing Foundation. So this is a new program that I just took on a few weeks ago when I was invited by them to be a Reiki Ambassador for the United States, which means that my goal is to raise awareness of this life force, this energy force for self-healing, and to really help spread it to the masses. And so we will be having a guest speaker from Reiki Healing Foundation as well that will come on and tell us how it works and what is it good for, and hopefully for you all to understand that process. Also, to really embrace the fact that there are alternative ways of looking at things. I heavily believe in juicing, and I think it's important. But as we go through, there are weeks that I will give you simple tips and recipes on quickly being able to juice and what a good smoothie might look like, and just quick health tips to really help you to embrace a healthy way of living. We will also look at mental conditioning, right? Mental conditioning. How can we have positive self-talk? How can we work on what are known as ants, getting rid of the ants, automatic negative thoughts? Dr. Daniel Amin, who runs Amin clinics, he has done a lot of work. He's a psychiatrist who's done extraordinary work. And through scans, SPECT scans, he has found where we have pockets of the brain that need a little bit more TLC, or what's going on how things can happen. And he has done a lot of work with nutrition and what nutrition can do for our brain. So we will talk about some good foods that can really help with mental conditioning. I know a lot of us know about omega-3s and 6s, but then giving you some really good tools for omega-3s and 6s as well. And so my goal for all of us is to feel that we are supported and held. And that is through this journey of life. And that's what makes Dia so special versus like when I was working in a clinical mental health facility. We were just focusing on the symptoms, right? The symptoms and the diagnosis. And that was definitely not my favorite part. I was really not only was I not good at diagnosing, it was just not my passion. But in a forum like this, then I definitely get to work on not only we're not trying to just address symptoms, we're working on the root cause, right? What is the root cause to our distress, to our health? And once we work through that root cause a little bit, we can work on that nutritional plan, we can work on some exercises that are supportive and different facilitation of what's called building that whole self. And so when you think of this Thea Holistic Life Care, you might be thinking, is this a facility? Is this like a place where I go to get alternative care? To be completely frank with you and honest with you, I don't know what the future holds, right? I don't know if we'll go that route where we actually have a huge clinical setting. Right now, we are kind of outsourcing to wherever we can provide services, and a lot of things can just be done on Zoom. Which is a great format to be able to help and assist and done through video. But do I see over time if the Reiki route with Reiki treatments, and I can provide those along with some alternative methods in a clinical setting, I will by far look at that as an option as well. And I do see down the pipe stem that can exist. But that is not the vision behind the goal here is to look at your whole life, right? Your emotional wellness, your physical wellness, your mental wellness, your financial wellness, all the spheres that hold us to make us whole. And when one is missing or something needs fine tuning, then we realize, okay, how can I get support? How can I get held in that? And then again, life is not stagnant. It's always in moving parts. So then we can find where the shift will happen and who can help us with that, who can help tap into that area. And that's where coaches and experts and folks can help to do that. And so one of our focuses is also on referrals, building comprehensive care to have good referrals and good care team. Now, those of you may be wondering when you're tuning in from different parts of the country and different parts of the world, like, how do I have access to something like this? And again, like I said, we are able to provide services on the phone. We use Zoom, not just because of COVID, but the fact is how it has truly been a great dynamic force for running our group workshops, like our grief workshops. And I also offer through our parenting, through the parenting business, we have parenting workshops. So the fact is that it all helps to embrace all factions and everything that could exist. A big focus on the health piece is also helping with the aging piece of our lives, right? We find that the aging can always have conditions and turn into chronic illness, and looking at those pieces. So there's a focus and a need to understand, how do we mentally and physically prepare our bodies as we age? What can we look at? And those are dynamics as well. And so as we build our platform, we have definitely built a lot of partnerships. One of our partnerships is actually with Pause for a Moment, Pause Inc. They're located up in Boston, Massachusetts, and Daria Williams Fernandez is going to be one of our guest appearances very soon. And she is a funeral director, and she's also the director of this program. And she is now our strategic alliance partner with Dia in the sense that she provides comprehensive care through the education platform through the lifespan. So we actually connected during COVID strictly by Zoom. So we never met, and I'm sure you all have had this experience where you've met people that you never thought you would be able to connect to, and probably wouldn't if we weren't in this pandemic. And so through that platform of the Death Doula program, met Daria. It was a class of about 93 on Zoom for about 2 months. And so we basically connected on the fact when she spoke, I really felt her energy of the work she's doing and what she brings to the table. The first conversation we had when I shared what Dia was and is and the mission statement, she also was sharing what she had in mind for this pause for a moment. And we literally have connected on the fact that Her services are educational focused. And of course, Thea, as she calls it, is the practical piece. Where do we help to hold people's hands when they need that personal touch and that personal care? And with that model, we found that education plus advocacy is truly a gift. And that's the big focus that I have become hugely passionate about, is that education. We take for granted simple, small, little tidbits of life. For instance, I'm trying to figure out how much water they should drink, right? In my health coaching program, we talked about it should be half your body weight. Then we have folks who are told they're supposed to drink 100 ounces of water. Then we have some that say drink to thirst. So then we have the idea that I'm coming along telling you, really, I will give you all the different modules. You're already going to be correct, right? But at the end of the day, you follow your own intuition, your own gut of what your body needs. And so an example for me at this point would be you drink to thirst, right? If you can try to drink half of your body, which is highly recommended in ounces, go for it. But there are days you may not be feeling it, but then drinking to thirst, right? Our body has its own expansive way of doing that. And we're actually going to focus on a whole conversation about water one day, because it's hugely important as a way of preventative measures for health, and as well as what water can do to support the journey if you're in the cancer module, or even in survivorship, and what that looks like. What I'm trying to say is the topics are numerous. Of course, I have so many that could be covered, but as you know, on the bottom screen, you can reach out for the ones that you find of value, and what you're looking for. What is it that you do want your hand held on support for the times that we come once a week together? And what type of guests, like who do you think, in what field do you think would be helpful? And then I will work my best to work and moderate and facilitate those, those pieces together. What I also want you to know is that the goal behind this organization is to lead the best life that you can. And the best life that you can comes through health, does come through mental health, being stable and thriving, where we don't let people influence our decisions. We live our most authentic, transparent lives. And those pieces take work and time, and they also need to be held. Where I am today, I couldn't have not been held. I had a great social worker in my mom's journey, in her cancer journey. She held my hand, and I thank her for every day that she held my mom and me while she was actively dying. The post when she came and checked on me for a few months, and then she got slammed with COVID, but I just knew I carried her with me. I hold her so dear to my heart. I also have been blessed with, just when you have the fact that you have someone who may not be a clinician, but has really good listening skills. But in addition to, you still need a place, you still need to be held, as we do all, by something that's not in our family necessarily, where we feel that we can be transparent, be vulnerable, and do all of those things. And so I hope that I can be that person for you, or to help facilitate that team for you. Because I have found meaning after, where I have basically doing this concept of what this show is about, lighting up your life. My lighting up my life comes through service. I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita right now. I was talking about it earlier with you all. My mom, who read it, a lot of folks have read it. Of course, I can't read Hindi, but I can read English. So I'm reading the English version of it. I read a few pages each day. I'm in the middle portion. And so it talks about karmic yoga, different types of yoga. I think we'll be talking about yoga in one of our classes and what it actually means so that you understand the true principles of how it's about you and your practice. And in there, every time I think about how service and servitude and what it means to serve. And essentially, I have found that that is my mission. That is my purpose. And it literally adds light into my own life. And so that's where I feel like I come in for you, is that you find your purpose. What is your purpose? Maybe it got straight along the way. Maybe it's that it needs a little bit of a jump start. Maybe it's that you have gone through this COVID crisis to a max level where you lost your business or you lost someone or something drastic, and so many things have happened to you. Maybe you got diagnosed with cancer in this interim. So that's where I feel like I would love to be able to help hold your hand in service. And if not, like I said, I will find you as much as I can the best care possible. In our few short moments together, those of you who are listening to on the radio, even if I ask you to close your eyes, remember, you can't do that part, but you can listen to my words when we talk about some breathing. We'll take the next few minutes to just focus on some breath work. Do you know we have so much stagnant carbon dioxide in our system that needs to get out, and it has nowhere to go but sit in? So I've been leading some wellness workshops recently, and I do a lot of guided relaxation for various workshops, and I really have found grounding, and I've decided if we have this forum, I think it's important to use as well. So I am going to close my eyes, and if you're in a safe place and you want to do the same, then I encourage you to do the same, okay? All right, if you could take a minute and just relax your hands to wherever you feel suited. Mine are actually clasped together. And I want you to just close your eyes if you feel comfortable and you're safe. And go ahead and take what's called a deep belly breath in, where you're going to pull your navel cavity and your abdomen inward. And this is one of my favorite breaths I want to share with you today. It's called the ocean breath. On the count of 3, we're going to release and exhale an ah sound like this. This is known as the ocean breath. You can do this anywhere. For those of you who are driving, you may not have your eyes closed. I mean, you don't have your eyes closed, but you can definitely do it while you're driving too. It lets go of that carbon dioxide, stale air, and you're doing just recirculation of a lot of things, or circulating new into your body. Okay, let's try it together. Deep breath in and exhale out. 1, 2, 3. Let's do 2 more. Deep breath in and exhale. 1, 2, 3. An ah sound. And last one. Deep breath in. 1, 2, 3. And exhale that ah breath. And when you feel ready, go ahead and gently flutter your eyes open. And I would have done this with you a lot longer. First of all, I usually don't close my eye. When I do this on Zoom, when I'm leading practice, I take myself off a camera so that they are not focusing on my face, but my words. And I take a lot more pause in between. But I do think it's important for you all to have the opportunity also to have breath work as well. On this note, I bring my hands to heart center. And I want to say that I am so excited about our journey together, and that my light shines for the light in you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And as we build this platform together, please seek me out to tell me what we should have and what we can add on. Thank you, and see you next week.
The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.